In this series, we will explore various dimensions of Christian prayer. In this meditation, we will look at prayer as desire. And so the mystery of Christian prayer introduces something new into the theatre of religious experience. There is a specificity to Christian prayer, such that the Christian does not pray like anyone else. As Christians, we have a particular way of praying into which we are being invited to grow. However, this way is also informed by what is natural to the human heart. The human heart lives in incompleteness. Biologically, sexually, our bodies reach out to another for completion. This was the insight of St. John Paul II in his understanding of the nuptial meaning of the body. But this drive to connect extends beyond the physical and emotional embrace of another person. Deep within each of us is the restlessness to which Augustine alluded. Our hearts are restless until they rest in you, O Lord, he wrote. We find this spirit of intentionality for someone more vast and more simple than ourselves. To use an eloquent phrase of the earlier 20th century French mystic Teilhard de Chardin. Such a spirit manifests itself through such diverse experiences as the childlike delight contained in a moment of wonder, to the nomadic impulse of the heart in elusive quest. When we look back on our life's unfolding, we should not be surprised about the current of transcendentality deep within us, erupting into conscious moments and seizing us, inviting us, haunting us, pulling us. Perhaps it's been whilst we are surrounded by nature, watching the majesty of the sun dissolving into the Western Ocean, or whilst breathless at the awesome canopy of the stars on a clear, silent night. Perhaps it's been while holding the gaze of the eyes which love me, in the silence which follows lovemaking, or in the first cry of my children, or in companionship with their struggle for life against all that might threaten their possibility. Alternatively, perhaps it's been at those moments of sickness, at the shock of an unfavourable prognosis, or at those times of failure, of profound discouragement, in which I feel entombed within the past, or at times of deep anxiety in which the future seems only as threat. The late English writer Daniel O'Leary expressed it this way when he wrote, "Because our human condition is never complete, there is almost always within us a yearning for wholeness. We carry intimations of a finer destiny. We intuitively search for a lost paradise. Is there a subtle compulsion to transcendence, he observes, in every heart? Is there an intuition of another existence somewhere in the soul of the millions who drive, walk, cycle to work each morning? Does the mother of a young family look out of the window of her home and sometimes dream of a brighter place? Does the successful businessman at the height of his career watch the morning fields fly by from his first-class seat and wonder if that's all there is? Intimation of a deeper joy in another homeland come only in scattered and subtle glimpses, as O'Leary observed. We are congenitally overcharged for this earth, he wrote. We are infinite spirits in finite conditions. There is an undertow of unfulfillment that only union with our source and our destiny will heal and complete. To be tormented by restlessness, O'Leary wrote, is one of the many frustrating consequences of being both human and divine at the same time. There is no escape from the echoes of an infinite horizon. We live, he wrote, in the thin place where mysteries meet. To give this yearning its acknowledgement is to commit ourselves to a journey, not always predictable. Welcome or unwelcome, the foundational intentionality towards infinitude is part of the structure of the person, a part of the very nature of being. The Scottish writer Noel Dermot O'Donoghue would say, to see the person as responsive is to see them in an open, existential way, answering in full freedom the call to reality. The person as we know them is always a wayfarer, always setting forth, always transcending their present situation, always responding to the invitation of further horizons. And so prayer, in whatever tradition, gives direct expression to this fundamental orientation springing from the depths of the human heart. We may therefore be as bold to affirm that its conscious articulation, prayer, is part of the essence of what it means to be human. Our Christian tradition, particularly in the West, has its own way of speaking about the yearning for something, someone vaster, more simple. It is called simply desire. The movement of ecstasis, a stretching beyond the limits of ourselves into the incomprehensible mystery of God. Springing from and transforming the dynamism of eros in our life, it moves more and more into the experience of affectivity. That is simply love, which ultimately for the Church Fathers is the only means of understanding. This is the tradition of what was called amor intellectus, the understanding that can only come about through love. As Richard of St. Victor in the 12th century wrote, where there is love, there is seeing. And especially in the Augustinian tradition, which prevailed to the 12th century, desire is regarded as a hallmark of the experience of prayer. To pray is to desire, and to desire infinitely. And so since the human faculty of desire stretches so clearly into infinity, it becomes for us the royal pathway of prayer itself, and the way in which we live into divine life. Desire is the well of living water which was released into its freedom through the encounter with Jesus, as the 4th chapter of the Gospel of John intimates. As we read there in chapter 4, the water that I shall give will turn into a spring inside you, welling up to eternal life. And so desire is this spring from the well of our own selves. Growth in our Christian prayer then can never be evaluated by any growing comprehension of God or by any self-conscious holiness, nor by a type of mental quietism, but rather by an increasing desire for God, for the other, to whom our being naturally tends. This is brought into particular expression in the Christian tradition by Gregory the Great, the doctor of desire as he came to be known. Gregory was born around 540 and made pope on the 3rd of September 590, dying in Rome in 604. And Gregory developed a structured reflection on Christian experience using the dialectics of absence and presence, possession and non-possession, certainty and uncertainty, light and darkness. He knew what Yves Catan in the 20th century sought to express when he wrote, Believers always lack the God whom they always attain only in a presence which lacks something. So we will not be surprised to see this experience expressed in the words of desire. Interestingly, Gregory's ill health became the very crucible for his spiritual doctrine. As Jean Leclerc observed, Gregory's poor health is one of the great events in the history of spirituality, since to some degree it determined his doctrine. It gives it those qualities of humanity and discretion, and the ring of conviction which explains his influence. In his doctrine on prayer, Gregory imagined it as if it were a set of scales. On one side of the scale is the weight which attracts us to the earth, so to speak. The weight which is proper to what is changing and mortal, the gravity which is the sign of corruption. With this weight, we experience an agitation, a lack of tranquility and peace. And therefore, for Gregory, prayer begins in humility, in our conscious need of God. But the scales begin to tip in the experience of what he calls compunction, and the compunction of desire, this experience of, as it were, being pierced through in our inmost self and being spiritually irrigated by tears of remorse through this recognition. It is Gregory who translates this Eastern concept into our Western tradition. And thus we are caught up in a spiritual flight which counteracts our heaviness. And on wings and with the plumage of an eagle, as he wrote, we find ourselves rising toward God, seeking him and hastening towards him. A new weight carries our soul to God, and this Gregory describes as the weight of love. And so the soul, hardened by egoism, becomes tender. The cold soul is warmed and cleansed of its rust. Returned, brought back to its true center of gravity. Converted, it is free and at peace. Now it enjoys tranquility. It grows in stature. It, as it were, becomes dilated. The soul becomes fruitful in the service of God. And as this process of purification develops, for Gregory, we experience then deep within us an inner song, a slight murmur, a silent word, which is protected and nourished by what he calls the active life, which he means by which the reading of scriptures and meditation on the mysteries of Christ. And so Gregory's doctrine is concerned with constant progress, for desire, as it becomes the more intense, is rewarded by a possession of God which only increases desire still more. As Bernard of Clairvaux in the 12th century would put it, the gift of finding you is to desire you yet further. And yet the result is a peace rediscovered in God, since desire is itself a possession in which fear and love are reconciled. Love, as the outcome of desire, gives unity to all and resolves all contradictions. And therefore, there is a reconciliation of opposites. All of this echoes Gregory of Nyssa, writing in the 4th century, for whom desire is not simply a passing experience, but one which lasts even for eternity. Gregory of Nyssa therefore speaks of a satisfied dissatisfaction, even upon our attainment of heaven, because there our desire, now eternally free, moves us from glory to glory. The true sight of God consists in this, he writes in his Life of Moses, that the one who looks up to God never ceases in that desire. This understanding of desire in our Christian tradition introduces the possibility that we're not simply stretching out into the mystery of infinity in an isolated fashion. This desire, as understood by Gregory the Great, begins to personalize that yearning we alluded to earlier. Desire speaks of an object which is desired, just as it intimates relationship with that object or that goal of what is being desired. And it is precisely because of its inherent relational and personal dimension that desire assumes such a critical significance in Christian spirituality, such that, as we stated earlier, it's ultimately about relationship with a personal God. The late English Benedictine writer Sebastian Moore effectively summarized this relational significance of desire when he observed, "Self-love, trusting in the mystery that embraces me, is the essential act of living that we call desire. Desire, whereby alone a person lives, is the trusting relationship that binds the person to all being, becoming actual. Desire, as he wrote, is stretching in the reality I'm in." This relational context of desire is vital to our understanding of desire, Sebastian Moore wrote. We only have to reflect on the family likeness between the concepts of desire and hope, and between hope and trust to get the point. Desire is hopefulness and trustfulness, and hopefulness is hopefulness of, trustfulness is trustfulness in. In other words, desire is embedded in a relationship, what Marcel called the nuptial bond with life. And so Sebastian Moore went on to say, desire is love trying to happen. Always the mystery is prior and all-embracing. In the heightened consciousness of the mystic, the all-embracing mystery is known as the spouse. It's drawing the subtle ruses of the lover in the Song of Songs. For the mystic is someone for whom the logic of desire is explicit and a consuming passion. The more one has experienced this enveloping, the more one comes to think of desire as invitation from the incomparable mystery, which seems to take the initiative. And so Sebastian Moore goes on to say, once we understand desire as solicitation by the mystery we are in, we understand something that is often noted in spiritual writings. That whereas desire that is simply a felt need ceases once the need is satisfied, vital desire increases with satisfaction. C.S. Lewis says of what he calls the sweet desire, that the one thing one longs for once the desire has gone is to have it again, to be again aching with it. This increase of desire with fulfillment, of course, is only intelligible once we understand desire as a trustful relationship. One can always be more trustful, more connected, which means more desirous. To desire God in this way, then, to reach out in our attentiveness with great intention toward God in simple desire, may take some courage from us. Sometimes this desire can frighten us. We are used to trivializing our desire. Some of us have great difficulty desiring. So used we have been to being disappointed in desire. We may have been taught not to desire, to simply be grateful for what is given. And as a result, our horizons are small. We dare not reach out too far. When we do, we can be so overwhelmed with selfish feelings that we quickly pull back. Yet as we follow this deepest desire, whenever or wherever it presents itself, we realize over time that it deepens and steadies. It is never far from the surface. In times of quiet, we become conscious of it, and it fills the space around us. As time goes on, it also purifies. Perhaps it started off in a very intercessory way. We prayed to God because we wanted certain things for ourselves and for others. Then it changed to a desire to become a certain kind of person. Then it matured to a desire to be simply open, to have the dispositions of receptivity before God, before it simply becomes a desire for God's own life, a desire to share in that life, a desire to share in the hospitality of the banquet that is our God. At each stage, it is the same desire, maturing, becoming more and more itself. And in the process, it transforms us, as we saw from Gregory the Great. The author of the 14th century classic, The Cloud of Unknowing, suggested we might use a single word to capture this desire that wells up inside of us in our moments of deep attentiveness. A word that we might use as a mantra. In our moments of deep attentiveness to life within us or around us, he urged us, this is what you are to do. Lift your heart up to the Lord with a gentle stirring of love, desiring him for his own sake. Center all your attention and desire on him. There will be nothing but a naked intent toward God in the depths of your being. Learn, he wrote, to be at home in this darkness, letting your spirit cry out to him whom you love, he whom neither men nor angels can grasp by knowledge, can be embraced by love. Never strain your mind or imagination. By love he may be touched and embraced, never by thought. And so as he went on to teach, then, let your loving desire, gracious and devout, step bravely and joyfully beyond it and reach out to pierce the darkness above. Pierce that cloud with the keen shaft of your love, a naked intent toward God. The desire for him alone is enough. Many centuries later, the English spiritual writer Bernard Bassett, in a delightful passage in his 1960s book on prayer called We Neurotics, constructs this dynamic into a very method of prayer. He has one of the characters, Miss Copsley Smith, trace the outline of her way of praying, and this is how she describes her method. Relax your muscles, and then start the thrilling journey to the center of your soul. Teresa preferred to see herself climbing upwards, so did John of the Cross. I go downwards, as I am a bit too old to change even for them. Let me put it this way, she said. Do you know those little cardboard models of the human body used by doctors and nurses in their student days? You have a flat little cardboard man with no clothes on, so that the students might study his superficial structure, skin, joints, and veins. You put the little fellow flat on his back and you open up his first little flaps. Up with the skin and the ribs, and you come to the various organs, starting with the lungs. Up with the lungs, you come to the heart. Up with the heart, and you find the liver and all the tubing, and eventually you come to his spine. Admittedly, it's not very elegant, she wrote, but that is how I pray. I open myself up layer by layer, starting with myself on the surface, my eccentricities, my mental beating. And next I come down to myself in my room where no one is looking. My games, my fears, my vanity, the fact that I never married, my sorrow, my remorse. I open up that and I arrive at the ego, or what I would prefer to call the heart. Lift up the flaps and I uncover the central longing, this yearning, this desire. And I invite God to look in and to fill it up. I sit or lie down and, being very liturgical, though the canon does not think so, I say inside, take a peep, O Lord. The most remarkable thing in all of this, ultimately in our desiring and in its growth in freedom through grace, we begin to intuit not just our desire for God, but also now, in the most remarkable way, God's desire for us. As Mechthild of Magdeburg in the 13th century wrote, "And God said to the soul, I desired you before the world began. I desire you now as you desire me. And where the desires of the two come together, there love is perfected."